everybody. Welcome to Chin Fat. In this episode, I'm going to be going over one of the new features in Premiere Pro 2025, which is we drag a clip down to our timeline here, and then you got to select a clip. It's going to be up in the Properties panel. So first of all, the Properties panel is a new feature that they've added here, which makes it really quick and easy to edit, just not a single clip, but multiple clips at the same time. But what we really want to concentrate on this episode is going to be this part right up here under Transform, which is called the Fill Frame and Fit to Frame. This is something that Adobe Premiere has updated and for the better as well. To understand what this is doing, you first of all have to understand resolution. And one way to make sure that you know what the resolution of each individual clip is up here, I've got a bunch of mixed footage, and I'm going to go up this little three-line menu tab here, and I'm going to pull that down, and we're going to show preview area. The preview area is going to show an area that gives you some quick attributes of whatever clip or timeline you may be selecting in your project window. So if I select this clip right here, we have a 3840 by 2160 resolution. That's near 4K, but not quite 4K, and we're running at 23.976, which is a broadcast time code that basically means 24 frames per second. If we select this one here, this is a little bit higher resolution. It has a different aspect ratio, which is 4096 by 2160. To figure out your aspect ratio, and bring open your calculator, and you will divide the higher number by the lower number. So I'm going to say 3840 divided by 2160 will simplify the 2160 down to 1 and show me what my aspect ratio is. As I hit return, this is they round this up, they'll call it 1.78 to 1. And 1.78 to 1 is basically the same thing as 16 by 9. What 16 by 9 is a version of that resolution. When you're showing your aspect ratio, it's shrinking these numbers 3840 by 2960 as small as I can get, but remaining as whole numbers, which is 16 by 9, not fractions, 1.78 to 1. 16 by 9 is the exact same thing. If you do 16 divided by 9, it will give me 1.78 to 1 as well. So that means you basically have 1.78 pixels horizontally for every 1 pixel up and down. Or if you're doing 16 by 9, for every 16 pixels, for every 16 pickles that you have, for every 16 pixels that you have going across, you have 9 pixels going up and down, which is the same as 1.78 to 1, but this is commonly referred to as 16 by 9. If we look at our next one right here, this is 4096 by 2160. So 4096 divided by 2160 gives us a 1.89 to 1 aspect ratio, which is wider than 1.78 to 1. So let's put this in a timeline as well, the 16 by 9. Drop that into there. And now I have a 16 by 9 aspect ratio here. But if you look at the difference between these two, go to this one, it is wider. It's just slightly wider than 16 by 9, than 1.78 to 1 or 16 by 9. So one thing that you have to decide is you want to decide what, if you're going to be mixing formats and resolutions, you'll want to think about what final resolution that you want for your master export. When you finish and you export out your movie, what do you want your final resolution to be? That's what your timeline is going to be. So right here, let's say I want my timeline to be 4096 by 2160. It's a true 4K. It's 1.89 to 1 aspect ratio, which is a very cinematic aspect ratio. And let's say that's going to be our final resolution. And our frame rate is going to be 23.976. So Premiere Pro is pretty good at mixing resolutions and frame rates. So we're not really going to necessarily get in frame rates. It will just conform. Like this one right here is just barely slightly higher. This is 24 and 23.976. For all intents and purposes, this is 24 frames per second, but if we drop one of these clips down in here, it's just basically going to conform this new clip here that I just dropped in to 23.976, especially when you export it out. That's what your final frame rate is going to be. So even though this one's 24, it is conforming it to 23.976. But let's show you what happens when we start when we mix resolutions here. So my timeline right now, right here, my final timeline is 4096 by 2160, matching the resolution of my drone footage that I have here on the timeline. If I go to this other file right here, this one is 3840 by 2160. This one right here is 1920 by 1080. And the final one here, this one was kind of a test on an open gate Panasonic camera, full frame camera, and the resolution should be 6K, but it's actually 3328 by 2496. And if we do a calculator on that to see what aspect ratio that is, 3328 divided by 2496 gives us a 1.33 to 1, which is a very common full frame aspect ratio. If you're shooting in video, still frames for sure, but they're the cameras that shoot in what they call open gate, which is using that full frame sensor, gives you a square image. And oftentimes what people will do when they shoot in full frame, if they shoot on full frame open gate, so we drag this footage down on the timeline here, they will be shooting, if their final resolution is going to be 4096 by if their final aspect ratio is going to be 1.89 to 1, they'll be shooting in this big square, but then they'll be using these frame guides that go across the bottom and then across the top here to show what your final framing is going to be. Then you can frame for that, but then when you put it into the timeline here, basically, they are zooming up on it. We'll show you an easier way of doing this. They're basically zooming up on it, and now you have some latitude to reframe. You can grab this and drag it down if you don't like it, and here's the end of your frame right there, or you can drag it up to reframe, depending on what you want your frame to be. You have a little bit of latitude in reframing up to down and tilting there. So let's show you what happens when you put different files with different resolutions in here. So let's show a couple of different clips here. I'm going to grab this one that's 3840 by 2160. And by default, when you drag this and drop it into the timeline, you're going to get what's called pillar boxes on the side right here. This is kind of the opposite of letterboxes. Letterboxes are on the top and the bottom. But this is the whole video image right here. If you double click on it, you can see the frame. That is the whole video image, and it's basically shares the same vertical resolution here. So basically what this does is squeezes it in until it fits this image in a wider aspect ratio, and you get the pillar boxing on the side. Now, if I grab something smaller here, let's grab the jumping dog here. I'm gonna grab that one there and drag and drop it down into my timeline here, and let's look at this. All right, so now you get what is called window boxing. So window boxing is when it has letterboxing on the top and pillar boxing on the side, and it makes a big old black square all the way around your image. And that's because this thing is smaller resolution. This is 1920 by 1080. It's literally 1/4 the resolution of 4K, which basically means I could, if I take this down to the very bottom here, you could basically fit this 4 times inside of this resolution right there. So 1920 by 1080 is literally about 1/4 the resolution of 3840 by 2160. This is 4096 by 2160, so it's a similar resolution size, but you could basically fit this more than 4 times within that resolution there. So that's what it's doing. When it's dropping in, it's showing the true resolution of this clip within this higher resolution timeline. So something you can do, you can individually fix all these. This is kind of annoying, have to go in and fix each one of these. If I scale it up to this aspect ratio, it doesn't quite fit in this aspect ratio. So this is called you're fitting to scale here. And as you scale it up like that, that's filling rather than fitting. So that's what these features are going to do automatically for us. So I just did it manually right there. So now when I play through this, it looks like the dog running is the same resolution as the drone footage here. So kind of a quick way of doing that. Let me delete these clips. I'm going to redrag them into the timeline. And now I have 4 different clips in my timeline. So this one fits the resolution of the timeline. This one doesn't quite fit. It has the pillar boxes on either side. Now I go to the next one here, and this one is a much lower resolution, so it sizes down and you have the window boxing. And then on this one here is a square shape. We did this full frame, so this has the larger pillar boxes on the side there. So, all right, so let's get into this, show how this works. So on the first one, that one looks fine. As we go to the next one, what we can do is we can select one, or we can select all of these. Let's do one at a time to show you what it's doing here. If I select this clip here, all I have to do, I don't have to fit to frame because it's already the same height resolution. So if I hit fill to frame, what it does is now you can see that wireframe beyond my canvas there. And you can see that it has zoomed up and as much as it needs to perfectly fit this to the frame. This is the nice thing that Premiere Pro has just added that I've been wanting them to add for quite some time. It does this in DaVinci Resolve really well. And now finally in Premiere Pro, they've corrected this and now it works the way it should be working. So if we go to the next one here, this one is much smaller resolution. Like we mentioned, 1/4 the resolution. You have to select the clip to bring it up in the properties panel up here. And now I'm going to try 2 things. First of all, we're going to try fit to frame and look what this does. This retains the original aspect ratio and zooms it up as much as possible while still leaving these pillar boxes on the other side. You may be doing this if you have like some old 4x3 like movie clips that you're trying to fit into it and you don't want to zoom up on your old style 4x3 square shape and have it be cropped out where it's cropping part of the image out. But that's what you can do if you want it to not just fit the frame, but fill the frame where it gets rid of the pillar boxes or letter boxes. You can hit fill here and it will fill that up. It'll zoom it up as much as it needs to perfectly fill in that frame size there. So if we undo that, so we can skip the fit and just go right to fill if we want. Click on fill frame and it zooms it up and fills it up the frame there. So let's go to the last clip here. And one thing that you'll notice on the last clip here, when I've got it selected, look at the wireframe. It's got a little bit of the wireframe sticking out. That's because this has more vertical resolution than these clips here. So the vertical resolution, it's basically the opposite of this dog jumping one here, where it was like sized down to its original resolution. This is this file's original resolution right here. It has larger vertical resolution than the timeline. So you see a little bit of that cropping out of the image. And we can do 2 things. We can either fit it to show the entire image, or we can fill it to zoom up to where it fits the frames on the left and the right-hand side. Now you have that ability to kind of use your tilt here to tilt up and down and reframe your image just slightly. If you want to bring it down a little bit and reframe it, you totally can now. One of the benefits of shooting open gate on a full frame sensor. So, and that's basically what it does there. Let's show a different example. If we have a different timeline, let's create a timeline that is going to be a 16 by 9, 1920 by 1080 timeline. I'm going to make a timeline with a dog here. We've got our new timeline. We go up here. I'm going to tell this to fit. So now we have a 1920 by 1080 timeline, and anything that we drop in here, we're going to grab this 4K footage right here. I'm going to drag and drop it into my timeline. And this is much larger resolution. So by default, let's look at this here. If I double click on this, I'm not seeing the wireframes. They're so big that you can't really see them outside the frame here. So if I'm going to shrink this down, let's go to 25%. Now you can see this resolution, and we're losing out on all that resolution, and we're losing out on all that image right there because this is a higher resolution than this timeline. So once again, we can select the clip and we can go up to either fill to fit. I'm just going to be doing fill here. So it just fills it up perfectly and doesn't have any letterboxes or pillar boxes. I'm going to hit fill, and there we go. Zoomed up to this, and it fits it perfectly now. And it happens to be the same aspect ratio. So even though it's higher resolution, it fits within this frame perfectly and doesn't have anything cropping out of it. But now if we grab other clips like my drone footage and drop it into the timeline, and we look at that, let's zoom out here to our 25%. And look, see all this resolution, how much larger resolution this is than my 1920 by 1080 timeline. I hit fit, and now we're going to have letterboxes on the top and bottom because this is a wider aspect ratio. If we do fill, it will zoom up, and now notice we got the little edges of the resolution outside of the timeline now. So going back to our mixed timeline here, that was the 4096 by 2160 timeline here. As we go through it, and once again, once the clips were brought in, this one pillar boxes, this one window boxes, and this one pillar boxes as well. So one quick way of fixing everything, if you've been editing in your timeline, you have everything in your timeline that you want to fit to it, you can grab multiple clips at the same time, and we're going to say we're going to fill the frame on all these clips, and instantly it does it on all those clips. Well, hey everybody, that's it for this tutorial. If you have any questions or comments, please post them, and thank you for watching ChinFat.